If you and I are being honest with one another, we may all want to daily drive a track car. But in the cold, hard light of day, very few of us need to daily drive a track car. Why? Because the expectations of doing something so foolish rarely live up to the reality. And this is one of the biggest reasons why convertibles with 500 horsepower exist. So, yeah, 500 horsepower. Not exactly. This 503 horsepower, but you already knew that because we've covered this S58 3-liter inline turbocharged 6-cylinder engine in many previous M3 and M4 episodes. This engine, exactly the same, other than being strapped into a different carrying case. The torque then would be 479 pound-feet, all fine and good. But usually when one lops off the roof of a car, it gains weight. So how does that impact the performance figures? Well, remember the M3 all-wheel drive competition, which this is kind of based on, actually very much based on. That was 3.4 seconds to 60. This is 3.6 seconds to 60. And then there's the VMAX, and here once again we have to go back to the M3 competition all-wheel drive. That was 155 miles an hour, or with a prudent walk down the options list, 180 miles an hour. This, 155 miles an hour, surprise, surprise, or with the same walk down the options list, 174 miles an hour. Being this is the 6th, or it may even be the 7th flavor of all-new M3, M4 generation that you and I have driven together, you will not be surprised by the weight. 4,306 pounds, or depending on express your weights and measures, 1,953 kilograms. Now, what you will be surprised by, the weight delta between this and that M3 all-wheel drive we just drove. This, 316 pounds more with that. Oh yeah, and there's a delay. Oh no, delay just turned off. God, this thing sounds magnificent without that roof. Jesus, I need a chest for that sound. This, you know what? You really don't notice the 316 extra pounds when you're pushing it aggressively on roads like this. You do notice it a little bit around town when you're in like comfort mode. There you're like, it's a little bit sluggish, but only when you're driving it kind of in a lackadaisical mode. But when you go full taps and push this thing aggressively, it's every bit of magnificent, at least in the way it delivers power, as the sedan and the coupe we've driven. I would say this one, it's a little bit more visceral because you're getting more sound with that roof down. God, this is still an unusually good experience with this engine. It's way better than one would expect after looking at the numbers on paper. This, unbelievable, or should I say, wunderbar. Okay, let's put aside all the excitement and focus on why it does that. And I would argue it's a bigger function of the driving dynamics rather than just the way it delivers power. And there, a bit of a recap. It's got that double joint strut up front, the multi-link in the rear, and that all works in conjunction with some exotic construction of those materials. Like up front, the wishbone at the bottom of the strut, as well as some of the other components of the front assembly, is all aluminum, so it's a little bit lighter weight, which is why the vehicle isn't 4,500 or 4,600 pounds. I can't honestly say to you, oh my God, this is a pig. You don't really feel 4,300 pounds. Then let's get to the business of this being a convertible. Does any cowl shake exist? And there, nothing. Like, you don't even feel the extra 316 pounds. I thought you'd feel a bit more here because you're putting more torque through the same platform that we've already driven in the new 4 Series convertible. But this, it's kind of incredible. You don't really feel a lot of lean pitch, any of that kind of stuff, and that's a big function of the size of the vehicle, and I would argue some of the experimenting with the suspension, as well as that use of exotic materials underneath the vehicle. Okay, now that you and I have all that out of the way, let's turn our attention to the star of the show, and that would be the all-wheel drive system. So yes, if one wants a folding top flavor of M4, one can have anything they want as long as it's a competition all-wheel drive. Which means, yes, no manual transmission. We can bitch about that together via my socials or via the comments below. Now let's focus on why that's important. That M3 all-wheel drive we drove, about 2-3 weeks ago? One of the best all-wheel drive systems in this equation of car that I have ever driven. And one of the reasons is it sends torque to the front wheels only when the system feels absolutely necessary. So yeah, it works when the mission is living in Chicago, but for the most part, it's not sending torque to the front wheels, maybe under hard acceleration in a straight line. But here, you feel like you're driving a two-wheel drive car. There's a noticeable difference in the steering of this vehicle. It is direct. The feedback is magnificent. I would say it's more perfect than what has come from BMW in the past, and it's that combination of the flexible all-wheel drive system and real steering in a performance car like performance cars of the past, specifically some of the lighter BMWs we've driven like 30 years ago. It's transformative, and it makes this generation of M3, M4 wonderful. I'd even go so far as to saying there's really no downside to the all-wheel drive system other than probably complexity, weight, and perhaps even cost. But at the end of the day, why did BMW do this? Well, think about it. How many people are really going to buy an M4? How many people are going to buy an M4 competition? And then how many people are going to buy an M4 competition convertible? Now, all of that complex math adds up to the ability of M GmbH to sell a very expensive, very trick, very flash convertible in places where people wouldn't normally buy a convertible. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game on the options game with today's contestant, something that includes two disparate items we never usually discuss together, all-wheel drive and a convertible. That seems to be a theme that's coming up more and more these days, especially von Deutschland. This one, the 2022 BMW M4 Competition X-Drive Cabriolet for a base price of $86,300. Now, as a point of order, if this were the M3 Competition X-Drive, meaning all-wheel drive, that would be $76,900. Now, in this episode, we're doing something unusual. You're seeing two different cars, two different colors. This one is Brooklyn Gray. As a New Yorker, I have to admit, it looks pretty good, although not really my cup of tea, but it is a cheap option color, $550. The other color, Tanzanite Blue, Santa Maria, Madre de Dios. That is stunning. We first saw it on the X5M like 2 years ago. That's not as cheap, $1,950. The blue car has like a gray and black interior. This one has the Kilami orange and black interior. Now, if I had my druthers, I would do the blue car with the orange and black interior. The only problem we get to is the top. In both cases, it's black and it's terrible. In the blue car, maybe like a light gray to pick up the seats. In this one, maybe red to really make it pop. Or, here's something interesting. Blue car, orange seats. Remember the Bentley Continental we drove like 10 years ago, the purple dinosaur? It literally was a purple car. It had like a denim color, but there was almost like a sheen to the top. That would work here. Either way, you and I still have to pay $2,550 for the obnoxious orange leather. Then we press on to the driver's assistance package. We've seen this in many other BMWs. It's the level 2 autonomy. Repeat after me. There's no such thing as a self-driving car, even if we pay $1,700 extra for it. Then the executive package. This is the heated steering wheel, the LED headlights, the Qi wireless charger, and the head-up display, $1,350. Then the M Drive Professional. That's like a track app, $900. I'll pass on that. Carbon fiber trim on the inside of the car. Both cars have this, $950. Then the M carbon fiber bucket seats. I know, many of you say these are horrible. I love them. The only thing it needs is an adjustable lumbar support for it to be perfect. I like the stiffer seat, so I would pay the $3,800. Both cars have it. Then the M Driver's Package. This is how you get 174 miles an hour here, 180 in the M3 sedan, and you pay $2,500 for the pleasure of that. Then this car does have the carbon fiber exterior trim, I don't think I'd pay the extra $4,700 for it. Now, the only other item we have to pay extra for is the destination and handling von Dingelfing Deutschland for $995. And I would like to point out, that is a couple of $100 cheaper than the destination and handling in that Kia EV6 we just recently drove, and that car is like less than half the price of this, which brings us to the total retail price of $107,095. Now, something very important I need to point out here. You're seeing in the B-roll a Tanzanite blue car, but this car we're driving is Brooklyn gray with a Kaliyama orange interior. The reason why we've split the two cars, the Tanzanite blue car has practically every option, including carbon ceramic rotors. This, it has the standard fitment steel rotors. You and I have driven practically every version of M3, M4, but every car was fitted with a carbon ceramic rotor, so I wanted to test this with the standard brakes. Now, what are they? 380 mils in the front, 370 in the back, as opposed to 400 in the front and 380 in the back with the carbon ceramic rotors. But the big difference, it's not as immediate in the braking, it's not as sharp. But here's the thing, $8,150 for those carbon ceramic rotors. I'm not mad at that, but one doesn't really need that much stopping power driving the car around town. And here, I would go so far as to saying that BMW, they're about the best in the business in terms of performance brakes that are steel rotors. Okay, so that's all fine and good, but what's the reality in the delta between the steel rotors and the carbon ceramic rotors? Well, it comes down to the mission of the vehicle. If this is going to be a track rat, one needs the carbon ceramic rotors, because after all, it is a 4,300 pound car, and you do feel a lack of immediacy between the two sets of brakes. But pushing it on roads like this, yeah, you can probably get over your skis, but that's a function of driver skill. I'd say around town, it's absolutely the steel rotor. So a convertible, you're really gonna take it on a track? Probably not, which means steel rotors. So this episode was far more important than just driving a 500 horsepower convertible. Rather, it was closing out a multi-episode arc of experiencing many different flavors of exactly the same car. And what I've taken away from that is this, one of my most favorite new cars to drive. Not just the convertible, not just the M3, and not just the M4. They all work and they have their own different personalities. For me, it would either be the M3 all-wheel drive competition or probably this one with a folding top, because I'm kind of biased to folding top cars. And it works not just because of how sharp that engine is or the driving dynamics, it works for two big reasons. The first time that we drove an M3, it was a competition, it was rear wheel drive, and we learned it no longer drove like a BMW, it drove closer to what a Porsche is like in a bigger car with a hell of a lot of power. Then combine that with a UX system that works, that's safe. It's not some gimmick. I'm not looking at a screen. Everything is not haptic feedback. I know this is basic and rudimentary BMW stuff I've been working on for over 20 years at this point, but finally it all comes together. I'd almost say I would own this. The only thing keeping me from owning this car is I would be terrified to own any BMW past the warranty, which brings us to the wish list. The interior with those seats, magnificent, but there's some bits that look bargain basement. Like the plastic that covers the inside of the A-pillars around the seats and other bits in the car. It's closer to what you'd see in a Kia or a Hyundai, not a $108,000 BMW, especially if I'm gonna pay an extra $4 large for the fancy seats. But that, one man's opinion. So I'm gonna turn this episode around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoMan TV, all one word, MotoMan TV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, a little bit behind the scenes, this New Yorker must now hand back this Brooklyn gray car and bring the Tanzanite blue car back into the hangar and drive that one for a couple more days. Why? Because Kumo won't get in this car. Not even making this up. He likes the blue one better. Until I see you in the next episode,